everyone, and welcome to Coast Connections. I'm Elizabeth Heinz, and today we're going to talk about one of the greatest rock events that Vancouver Island ever had. In fact, it's one of the biggest ones in the world. We're talking about Ripple Rock, the explosion in 1958 that saved many a mariner after this. Menacing rock was removed from the Seymour Narrows. And our guest today is Sandra Parrish from the Campbell River Museum. She is an expert on Ripple Rock and all the events that took place there that day. Welcome, Sandra, to Coast Connections.
Welcome. Nice to be here.
I guess Ripple Rock really did help to connect the coasts.
It certainly did, yes. More ways than one, yes.
Totally, in more ways than one. So take us back to Ripple Rock there in Seymour Narrows. First of all, where exactly is Seymour Narrows and where was the rock?
So Seymour Narrows is about, is just north of Campbell River, and it's a very narrow passage. It's about a 3-kilometer long passage, and by narrow, it's about 0.8 kilometers across. So you can imagine when the tide turns, there's a huge volume of water trying to get through this very narrow spot. So in fact, it almost looks like a river when the tide is running, and the whirlpools and the back eddies and so on and so forth. So almost in the very middle of this was an underwater feature which became known as Ripple Rock. So it was like an underwater mountain with two twin peaks, and at low tide, the tallest of the two peaks was only about 3 meters underwater.
Whoa.
So if you didn't know it was there and you managed you passed through it, it was a very extreme navigational hazard that many mariners lost their lives on.
And there were about 100 large vessels, ships that went down there, and about 30 or 40 smaller craft over the years. And I think 114 people lost their lives in the Narrows.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's recorded. There was likely many more. The first sort of major shipwreck that happened there was in 1875, and that was the USS Saranac. And it had a passenger crew of about 300 people heading up to Alaska from the scientists from the Smithsonian Institute. And it struck the rock, and the ship was lost. Here at the museum, we were very fortunate to end up with a little journal of Charles Sadelack, one of the passengers on board. And if you would like, I can read you a small section of what he remembered of that event.
Absolutely.
And
Let's hear what Charles had to say, firsthand experience.
Yes, absolutely. So Charles goes on to say, "I have never seen an inland body of water more threatening than Seymour Narrows. Even the ocean in a temper has no such ravening aspect. It may be doubted that Argonautic expedition experienced greater perils than are to be met at Seymour Narrows." And then he goes on to talk about how the ship floundered. Fortunately, there was no deaths from that encounter, but that is the first recorded shipwreck on Ripple Rock.
And keep in mind, during those years, that was all steam-powered vessels. They didn't have the engine power that today's vessels have. So them trying to navigate through that whitewater rapids with these menacing peaks underneath, if one peak didn't get you, the other one would. It was like two fangs almost, wasn't it? Like
Absolutely, two fangs. It's a good way to describe it.
Nasty. So over the years, over about 20 years, there were several attempts or ideas in the early 1900s how to get rid of this menace. And I think one of them was suggested that it be torpedoed.
Yes, yeah. No, there were a number of ideas. So about 1904, again, early, is when it was actually the U.S. government started petitioning the Canadian government to get rid of this navigational hazard, because of course the maritime traffic would have really been increasing over those years. So things don't move quickly. So it was 1921 when the petitions became to a point where they started to do a bit of a review and assessment of what could be done. And the end conclusion was that they decided that the best approach, the most economical approach, would be to drill the rock from above, load it with some dynamite, and blow it up. So that conclusion was in 1928. But again, things moved very slowly. And it wasn't until the 40s, and actually it was concern about protecting the coast during the war years that really brought it to the forefront. This was something that we needed to deal with.
Because of the convoys going up through that area as well. And there was some controversy that if we cleared it for the Allied convoys, the enemy convoys could also make their way through too. So it was a little bit controversial. Maybe that rock will save us. Maybe we need to get rid of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there was also an older idea that it could be used as for a bridge, as a spot for a bridge for the railroad to come across to the island. But so not everyone was in agreement about it.
Yeah. And at one point they set up barges and they were going to load it from the top, like you say. And these barges.
So 1943, they tried 2 attempts with the barges. So 1943 was the first attempt, and they anchored this 150-foot drill barge in the middle of Seymour Narrows with these cables attached to the Vancouver Island and Maud Island. Yeah. And within 24 hours, the first cable snapped. And that was the continuing problem that entire summer. Because, of course, they could only drill in the summer months because they wouldn't be having to fight the winter storms and things like that. So by the end of the summer, they had just a handful of holes drilled. So they tried the cable attempt again in 1945, and this time they strung very long cables right across and anchored the barge to that. Again, very, very challenging, but the sad thing that did happen during that attempt is their crew boat of 11 passengers were heading out to the barge, and the crew boat capsized and 9 men were lost. Oh. So, it even took people that were on that water probably every day going out to that barge. And so anyhow, that was the end of that attempt. Attempt number 2 with the barge, and that was just not gonna be feasible.
And can you imagine trying to drill on a barge while you're in this swirling whirlpool white water? I mean, you need a steady surface in order to drill with any precision. So that was a valiant attempt, but I can see why it would have failed. And then the cable snapping like thread with all that, because the water's coming through at about 15 knots there, and in a very narrow gorge. Yeah. So let's fast forward to the final solution. The camp that they set up on Maud Island. We've got a picture of the provided by your museum. All our photos here tonight of the camp being starting to be built there on Maud Island with this little isthmus over to Ripple Rock, and they started to build the mine shaft.
Yes.
So that was about what, 1955?
So November of 1955 is when they started this project. And the first order of business was to establish this camp, and you can see it in the back of that photograph. They built a little causeway between Quadra Island and Maud Island, and then they started drilling. So it was about they had about 75 crew in the camp, and they worked around the clock to get that project going. It was a very narrow tunnel, so there wasn't a lot of space for a lot of people in the tunnel. They pride themselves with having a very good safety record. with no serious loss during that time. And it took them 3 years to drill down, down and then under the rock and then up the Twin Peaks and then do these what they call these coyote drifts is where they packed it with the explosives.
Wow. And it was 750 tons of explosives that they packed into that mountain, that underwater mountain. And it was 7,000 canisters of explosives that they put in there. And Sandra, they drilled, it was about 570 feet under the water that they drilled to get in there.
Yes.
That's astonishing.
It is. And I was reading, it was the tunnel workers' account of it. And when they would do these coyote drifts, which is where they loaded the dynamite, sometimes they would hit the sea bottom.
Oh, wow.
And so the water would start rushing in and a few cod and a few other pieces of kelp. So they'd have to plug that hole and then go on to the next one. So
after they had lunch.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, wow.
So apparently they needed 10 times the amount of explosives that they would have needed if that was above ground to try and to remove it.
Yeah, incredible. And those miners were some of the best in Canada. And at the time, they were paid $2.15 an hour, plus 10% danger pay. And that was very good money because minimum wage in 1958 was only 60 cents an hour. So they were making 4 times the amount. So it was a good paying job, very dangerous job, but it brought the bread and butter home for the family for sure.
Yes.
Very courageous
absolutely.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've got this mountain loaded with dynamite. 750,000 tons. We're getting ready for the suspense is building, the big day's coming, April 5th. It was a Saturday morning, 9:30 in the morning. But there was all kinds of precautions that the locals and surrounding area had to take in preparation for this blast because they really didn't know what was going to happen. Let's talk about some of the precautions people had to take in the local area.
Oh, well, there's lots of stories about the precautions beforehand and on the day. People just really didn't know what was going to happen. And there was rumors that, the dam would burst up at John Hart or the mill would collapse and there'd be tidal waves and that sort of thing. So people definitely took all their china off their china shelves. Some people boarded up their windows. Other people just left town. There was a great deal of anxiety leading up to the event. And I'm sure a lot of, media concern as well about what would happen.
The population in Campbell River is about 3,000 people then. It's about 35,000, I think now, or 40,000.
Yes, yeah.
So a lot of people did leave town, but a lot of people came in. There was about 12 busloads of tourists who wanted to come to the viewing party.
Yes, yes. No, there was. And of course, in particular, Skip McDonald and his business partner, Bob Lewis, who owned the Beehive Cafe, were the ones who coordinated those buses coming in.
Okay.
They were quick to see that there was a dollar to be made from this, and they sold those tickets and took people up, not to the bunker area, but to another spot that was safe for viewing, because there was also a great number of police on site protecting the area and making sure that the public didn't get into a spot that they thought would be unsafe.
Yeah. They also closed the airspace within a 5-mile radius of Campbell River. And they also shut down the Lions Gate Bridge in Vancouver because they weren't sure what was going to happen when this explosion went. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And the CBC, it was their very first on-location live event that they did in Canada, was there at Ripple Rock that day.
It absolutely is. And that's the other thing about Ripple Rock is it's part, for that generation, it's part of a memory that they can remember sitting at home watching the explosion in anticipation,
Yeah.
and that first live broadcast. And there was TVs set up in town because there wasn't a lot of TVs in Campbell
No.
River at that point.
Yeah.
So community members came together and they were also watching that live
Yeah.
broadcast.
Let's just go back to the bunker that you mentioned. There was a bunker built for people to watch the explosion from a safe distance, as well as the paparazzi that came to town that day. A lot of cameras, a lot of really beautiful looking camera equipment. And as you say, some dignitaries and politicians came. And some of them are wearing a button that says Ripple Rock Caution, something like that. They were giving out swag that day.
Yes.
Those buttons would be worth a bit of money, I'm sure, today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love all the cameras and things like that you can see in the bunker.
Yeah. And Sandra, that one picture.
All the equipment. Yeah.
Yeah. That one picture of the bunker, there's ladies in high heels standing on top of it. And it's a muddy area, muddy day. Those ladies have like white plastic bags over their high heels and their lovely coats. The men in their fedoras.
Before, but you're quite right. Yes.
Yeah, they were styling. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's the era. You always went dressed for, in your best, right?
In your best, exactly. So the countdown started. The signal went off at 9:31, or 9:30. Walk us through that.
So the signal went off, people in Campbell River, some were on high ground, some had gone over to April Point for a special viewing point. Others had decided to live dangerously and were down on the beach, and they were all waiting in anticipation. Others were watching it on TV. And the explosion happened, and they felt and heard nothing. So all that anticipation and
silence
for naught. Yeah.
They said it was a bluebird sky that day. It was a gung-ho day. They described it as that, and all that, because all the sound had been absorbed underwater, which was phenomenal. When you see the pictures,
set of photos that you are showing here is one of my favorites because Campbell River's local photographer, he was up in the bunker, but he didn't get a very good shot because he obviously was not, his camera was not positioned in the right spot. So he kind of gets half the explosion. But irregardless, afterwards, again, those early entrepreneurs, they made a set of postcards and sold them at the Beehive Cafe for those tourists that were coming afterwards interested in Ripple Rock.
Fantastic. Now, Sandra, Campbell River is the acclaimed salmon fishing capital of the world. How many flying fish were out that day?
Well, they did have a fisheries boat, kind of looking at things, and they tell us that there weren't many flying fish that day, which is kind of hard to believe because that is a very big explosion.
Because you'd think they'd all float to the surface, Yeah. I guess they're a little more intelligent than we are. They all got the heck out of the area before the explosion went.
Yes.
Yes. So the site now is a Parks Canada designated as a National Historic Site, I think, right?
It's a national historic event is what it's considered. Yeah.
So a very anticlimactic event to everybody that was waiting all around the world. And this was broadcast live right across Canada with the CBC. Thousands and thousands of Canadians glued to their screen.
Watching it,
Crickets.
Yeah, and yes, crickets. Exactly it.
So that just speaks to the tremendous engineering feat that this was.
And it was, that's again, one of the other aspects, we get the descendants of people who were involved, whose parents were involved in the project, and all those engineers and rock miners and who were designed the drills and things. I'm very, very proud of this, being part of this feat.
Yeah. Terrific. And we have a lovely photo of, it was just within 24 hours, ships are going through the Narrows there like it was a mill pond.
Yeah.
With that menace gone.
No, I mean it's still he's still a lot of water going through a very narrow passage, so it is still requires respect, but it doesn't have that underground hazard any longer that
Hmm.
would make it, you know, impossible to
Exactly.
to be
And
safe. Hmm.
so they basically blew the top off this underwater mountain, got rid of the
Yeah,
fangs. And the clearance then at low tide is how much now with that
I think
gone?
they say it's about 45 feet.
45 feet.
Yeah,
And originally it was like 3 feet.
about 9 feet.
9 feet,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's a
yeah.
lot of. Now, this, when it exploded, it went about 1,000 feet into the air. And
Hmm.
how many tons of debris, rock and water, that were spewed everywhere? Was anybody hit by any of this?
No, I don't think so, but I do, I have heard a few people who snuck in past those police lines and, viewed it from unsafe areas,
Yeah.
but I haven't heard of anyone being hurt at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
Hmm.
good. And
Yeah.
so, is there a sign up there at Seymour Narrows now that people can go see, or is it
No, they have
marked?
yet, Parks Canada has yet to do that. There is a nice lookout just past Elk Falls Mill,
Mm-hmm.
where you can see the Narrows, but there isn't a sign there at all.
Yeah.
Of course, here at the museum, we do have in our little theater, we show the DuPont film Devil Beneath the Sea as one of the options here.
Mm-hmm. And we're just going to run because the entire explosion took 10 seconds. We're just going to run that footage again just to give people another a view of it, because
Mhm.
it wasn't video film. This was still film,
Yes.
still pictures. So what we're seeing on the screen is what they saw on TV, and same with the
Mhm.
audio. It was quiet. All
Yes.
those noses pressed against in the living rooms, pressed against the TV. Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there a celebration every year at Campbell River? Is there a Ripple Rock Day? How do we commemorate
No,
this?
so in 2008, which was the 50th anniversary,
Hmm.
is when we had the sort of the big celebration, and that's also when it was designated as that National Historic event.
Yeah.
So for that celebration, we produced a documentary that is on the museum's YouTube site that it's called Remembering Ripple Rock, and it has a lot of interviews with locals who talking about the project and their memories. Many of those people are now passed.
Hmm.
And then we also did a mini explosion. We did
Oh.
on a barge out front of Campbell River, sort of to at 9:31 a.m.
And the fish fry is at 9:42.
Yes. There were some pancakes, but no fish.
Yeah, there you go. And speaking of people's concerns or fears about this explosion and what it might happen, I mean, you have to remember that it was only like 12, 13 years since World War II. So, people were still nervous about bombing and all explosions and all types of stuff. Plus the earthquake that you had in Campbell River there in 1946, a
Yes.
7.3.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's a
Yes.
big earthquake.
Yeah.
So
No. No, it absolutely would be yeah, I mean, it was a different set of worries that the
yeah.
people in Campbell River would have had at that time. The other thing about Campbell River in particular is it was a real boom period. The Elk Falls Mill had opened up. There was the hydro development project. The community had grown.
Yeah.
I think you said it was about 3,000 at that
3,000.
time. It had, grown from about a 500 to 1,000 to in a very short period of time.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
mhm, yeah.
And the fear of a tidal wave was very real for people, especially since those that had experienced the 7.3 earthquake. And I like the story of a couple of journalists who actually climbed a tree and tied themselves in there, because if there was going to be a tidal wave, they wanted to capture the footage.
Well, or else the TV reporter that said that what you should do at the time that the explosion happens is open your mouth.
Yeah.
to avoid your ears being damaged.
Yeah.
So you can just imagine all the people in Campbell River standing there with their mouths opened, and they couldn't hear a darn thing.
No. There's a good meme in there somewhere.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is. Yeah. Yeah.
Anything up and coming at your museum that we'd like to see this summer, Sandra, while we have you here?
Yeah, so not for the summer, but we do have a traveling exhibit from the Royal BC Museum, and it's the mountain dinosaurs of BC, and that'll be here until June. Then in the summer, other than our permanent exhibits, one of the really neat highlights is our history on the water boat tours. And actually this year we are going to be doing one up into the Ripple Rock area. And these are great, about 4-hour tours where you get to go out on the coast with a museum interpreter, tell you about the history of the coast. So those are a really good summer event here at the museum.
That sounds really interesting. I'm glad it's not a 3-hour tour.
Yes.
Might have a little different outcome.
Well, you never know.
You never know. Yeah. And
we don't have Gilligan on board, so we should be fine.
Exactly. Might have a few millionaires, but no Gilligan. Yeah.
No, that's right.
Sandra, we just have a few moments here for your closing thoughts about Ripple Rock and the history there in Campbell River. Any closing words that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ripple Rock is absolutely one, still, after all these years, one of the top search requests we get on to our website. People are interested in Ripple Rock. And I think it is all those things. It's that watching that first live broadcast across Canada. Yeah. For Canadians, and then locally, it's that event, and the family stories about what they were doing and where they were, and it's a topic that continues to live in the hearts and minds of many.
Thank you, Sandra. It's a very nice
You're welcome.
and interesting slice of Canadiana here that
absolutely
many of us may not know about. So another reason to love this country.
Absolutely. There's lots of reasons
Absolutely.
to love this country.
It's been really a pleasure having you here, Sandra. I really appreciate your knowledge about this wonderful historic event. And may I say, it's been a blast.
Yes.
Sorry.
You've got a good sense of humor, Liz. It's been very nice.
Well, I hope to see you on that 4-hour tour this summer.
Yes.
All okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to having you head up to Campbell River, go on their website, take a look at the video from Ripple Rock, or take part of one of their activities there this summer. Thanks for watching. I'm Elizabeth Heinz. We'll see you next time on Coast Connections.